We're almost finishing ourselves, actually. I wanted to know, how did you get involved in the amazing work you guys do?
So I got involved through the Salvation Army through my family. So that's how I met the Salvation Army. My parents were Salvation Army officers, and they had a number of different roles, which meant that I lived across the world, in different countries. So I lived in the States for a while, Pakistan, as I mentioned, New Zealand, and I even lived in the UK for a bit too. But really, I've come to as well as a sense of God's calling on my life, to be part of the Salvation Army and to have leadership responsibility in the Salvation Army. The example of my parents is something that I am. When you're younger, you don't want to acknowledge the role your parents have on your life, but I really recognise that I wouldn't be in the Salvation Army without the example that I saw in them. With my dad, Shaw Clifton. He had a number of different responsibilities, but I saw him be someone who was willing to speak first. If he saw an injustice, if he saw that something wasn't right, he would be willing to break the silence.
Was he the general of the Salvation Army, the top person?
That's right, yeah. So my father was the international leader for the Salvation Army, and even in his role there, with a lot of responsibility across the world, he would be willing to break a silence. If something was wrong, he would break the silence, which then meant that problem was brought into the open, so that it could be talked about. With my mum, something I saw in my mum was that she would never discount anyone. So she would be able to recognise the potential in people. So when we lived in Pakistan, a lot of the Salvation Army women were not getting a great education, and so my mum set up English classes to teach women English, and so I saw this example, and I saw them do these things as Salvation Army officers.
How old were you when you first, from your heart, you wanted to join in them? How old were you then?
So I joined as a member of the Salvation Army. Good question. When I was, well, I joined when I was 7 as a child, as what we call in the Salvation Army a junior soldier. But then later in my life, when I was 16, I joined as a senior soldier, so as a member. But then it was really when I was 18, just before I started university, that I started to think, actually, you know what, this is probably going to be the thing this is what I need to do with the rest of my life.
Fantastic.
At that stage. So,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Can I come